Ed Marx has served as Tompkins County Planning Commissioner for 15 years, since 2002. We both came into this county government at the same time. He directs the planning department and oversees implementation of the county comprehensive plan, including development of strategic initiatives focused on housing, energy and greenhouse gas emissions, conservation and sustainable development. Ed leads the efforts within the county government to achieve organizational sustainability as well as county programs aimed at community sustainability long term. For a while, Ed was also Commissioner of Public Works from 2005 to 2010, and then Deputy County Administrator from 2003 to 2005. Before coming here to Tompkins County, he was Director of Planning and Community Development for Oswego County for 11 years. And I just want to say, these 15 years been a learning experience every day, a true pleasure to work with Ed and his amazing staff, who I feel like, I'm just always blown away by what they bring to the table and how they anticipate our questions and how they just really get things done. So thank you, Ed, and thanks to all the planning staff in Tompkins County.
Okay, good. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. We've been talking about housing in this county since I got here. Anybody that's moved here in their lifetime becomes an expert on housing instantly. Because, show of hands, who here has not faced a housing challenge in Tompkins County at some point during the residency here? Okay, a few of you. You're the lucky ones. But it's been an issue for many people for a long time, and we've been exploring, solutions for quite some time. So what I want to do tonight is just give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about. Talk a little bit about what we know about the problem, what we've done in the past to try to address it, our most recent needs assessment to update our understanding. Then a couple of other studies have been going on concurrently with the county study, a downtown market study, and Cornell looking at student housing needs at Cornell. And then share with you some preliminary ideas about what we think we might need in the future in terms of housing. So define the problem. First question. Complex issue. Not everybody's housing needs are the same by any means. We have a lot of different components. Families need something different than singles do. Students need something different than seniors. We have people with special housing needs that really struggle in a tight housing market. And then we've got a lot of stakeholders. We've got landlords and developers. We've got local officials and neighbors and neighborhoods. We have people trying to provide public transportation and services to people that need them. And we have employers trying to recruit and retain the employees they need. And housing is a factor for all of these folks. Just a brief review to set the stage a little, just in case anybody doesn't know where we are and what our characteristics are. We're about 105,000 people, almost a third college students. Households pretty evenly divided between what's considered family households, related people living together, and non-family households. Housing units, pretty close. About 54% are in single-family units. About 46% are in multifamily buildings. And similarly, the owner occupancy is about 54%, 46% renter. This is countywide. Varies a lot from municipality to municipality, but that's the big picture. A couple of other things. Income. Household, that's everybody's income average, median, not average, median, middle of the range, 58,000. For families, it's 84,000. For non-families, only 32. So people have different abilities in terms of their capacity to purchase housing that they need. The median value of an owner-occupied home is about $195,000, and the median rent in the county is a little over $1,000. So those are just some benchmarks of sorts. So what's the problem? Well, we have about 38% of people, owners and renters combined, that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Now, people have gotten used to that in many cases, and spending 40%, it's not shocking. As was mentioned by Christopher, it makes a big difference what the whole household cost for transportation and housing is. But generally, when you're spending more than 30%, it means you're shortchanging something else in your household budget. It may be the savings for retirement or for your child to go to college. It may be putting food on the table for your kids, depending on your situation. But it creates impacts that are very severe and very significant for a lot of folks. In terms of some of the stuff we've learned from the recent assessment, occupancy in larger multi-unit buildings is about 58% students. So people that need to rent in this community that are working in the community, not students, are competing with students for housing. That's pretty obvious to a lot of folks. But it can make a big difference in terms of your ability to secure housing and what you can afford to pay. Many students are 3-4 to a unit with parents paying the tab in some cases, and they can outbid a working family for housing pretty quickly. And so that creates stress on those working family households in terms of finding housing. The median purchase price in Tompkins County, and somehow a couple counties got deleted, but we've got Tioga, Chemung, and Cortland in that mix. Or Cortland's there, Chemung and Schuyler are there too. But as you can see, it's almost double. It's clearly 60 to 80% more to buy a house in Tompkins compared to the adjoining counties. And partly as a result, we've got 25% of our workers commuting in from outside, and that's been increasing over time. So what does that mean? Some folks would say, well, people are living somewhere. What's the big deal? People figure it out and do what they have to do. Well, there's a lot of impacts from the way we provide housing in our community. First and foremost is social equity. Who suffers the most? It's the folks at the lower paying jobs who can't afford to live near them, have to commute a long distance, then they incur the transportation costs, as Christopher was talking about. They struggle to use public transportation because even housing in proximity to bus routes is hard for them to secure. And oftentimes they have to move because housing costs go up and they can't maintain it. That has an impact on their kids when they have to change schools. The stability of a household can be impacted by their housing instability. Also, having 25% of the people that work here commute in means we don't have the advantage of everything they could bring to this community. They're not spending a lot of their money locally. They're not volunteering locally. They're not donating to local organizations, probably. And so all their talents outside of work are going someplace else. And their connection to the community isn't what it could be. From an economic development perspective, already mentioned, it's difficult to recruit people. We hear stories over and over again of someone who's been hired or offered a job. They're enthusiastic to come to Tompkins County, Ithaca, a great place. They look at the housing situation and they say, sorry, can't come there. That's tough on growing our economy. We also have an opportunity. We need more housing. If we could build it, think of the jobs, construction jobs and the other jobs to finish those housing units. We're missing out on that too. Gentrification, displacement, people's traditional neighborhoods, sometimes they can't afford to stay there anymore. They lose the connections, family and social connections that are important to them. Housing quality, when you've got a very tight housing market, reinvesting in units, why bother if you can rent it the way it is? And so housing quality can decline. Traffic and transportation impacts. We've I'm sure most of us that drive at all have experienced the traffic impacts. It's increasing, and our TCAT, public transportation system, is struggling to offer transportation that people would like to have, and that costs more money. And then finally, the more people are driving from farther and farther away, the more energy is being used, the more greenhouse gases are being emitted, and that undermines our efforts to reduce that. So what have we done to date? When I first came here in 2002, the first thing we did was undertake development of our first county comprehensive plan, completed in 2014. Top issue, one of the very top issues, was housing. The first thing we did was undertake a housing needs assessment in 2006, which was completed in 2006. Started in 2005, completed in 2006. At that point, we were looking not at students, not at income commuters, just trying to figure out what the workforce population housing needs were, and did a projection out 10 years, not with a spreadsheet or anything we could work with in the future. And it really wasn't something we could update. But we did the study, and it estimated we need about 4,000 non-student units by 2014, and the majority of those needed to be for people 80% and below median income. Well, the recession hit, so that 4,000 number might not have been what it is realistic after the recession, but we didn't make the total units, but we really didn't make the affordable units. And that's the challenge. The housing that we're building isn't affordable to the people that need it the most, for the most part. Now, there have been exceptions, and great work by INHS and others to build a lot of great housing that's affordable, but we haven't been able to build enough yet. In 2007, we adopted a strategy based on the needs assessment in 2006, and there were 4 major recommendations. One was develop a housing trust. The idea there is if you're putting public money into housing, and then it turns over, somebody buys a house with public assistance, it turns over 5 or 10 years and goes back at a market rate, you've lost that public investment. For the next person, it's not affordable to them. Housing trust keeps ownership of the land under the house, and by that ownership keeps the unit permanently affordable. INHS developed a program, have put 52 units in so far that are permanently going to be available to affordable people, either the people living there now or in the future. Provide more local funding to support affordable housing. We developed, in cooperation with Cornell in the city of Ithaca, the Community Housing Development Fund, which has $400,000 a year that's available to support affordable housing projects in this community. 294 units to date have been supported with that fund, and it's been re-upped for another 6-year term. We agreed initially for 6 years, and now it's been re-upped for another 6 years. 294 units. Significant, but not enough. Inclusionary incentive zoning. This is the idea of either requiring or providing incentives so that a certain percentage of new units built will be affordable at some level. 1 or 2 places have put it in their zoning ordinances. A couple places, several communities have mentioned it in the comprehensive plans. Hasn't been any project done yet to date that's used or taken advantage of that. Employer-assisted housing. Christopher mentioned that. Back when we did the strategy in 2007, we had looked at our major employer. Where do you start? You start with the big one, Cornell. They were interested in trying to work with some kind of a program to assist employees with their housing needs. The recession hit, endowment decline in value, stress financially at Cornell. We all know that story. They weren't able to move on that. Something we may need to revisit. So the period of that first assessment passed. We know we need to revisit it. We updated our comprehensive plan in 2015. Time to take another look. And this past year, we've been looking again at what the needs look like today. And so this time, we did it a little bit differently. We realized the student market affects the rest of the market so much you can't do it. You can't look at housing in isolation and not talk about student housing. So we're including it. We're using a model that can be adjusted as we go forward based on employment, student enrollment. We can plug in new numbers if things change and get new estimates of where we need to go. So this is something we can work with year to year and update. And we also recognize we need to look at in-commuters. This is a big issue for our future, and we also took a look at senior and special housing needs as important components of our housing market. Elements of the assessment, we hired Danter Associates. They did field surveys of existing rental housing, analyzed the existing market based on data available, did a lot of interviews with professionals in the area, reviewed employment and student enrollment trends, did a survey of special needs organizations that provide housing for special needs populations, and then we did an internet survey of 4,500 people, which was a really great response, including residents, students, and in-commuters. Some of the findings, the market rate inventory for apartments looked at 100%. They did an inventory of 100% of those larger properties over 24 units and a sample of about 22% of the units in smaller properties under 24 units. Found the vacancy rates of about 1.8% for the large properties, 6.5% for the smaller, and overall average of 4.5% vacancy. You can see the average rents there a little higher for the most part in the larger properties that are maybe a little more modern and recent in construction. Some other interesting points that come out of this. It's kind of a break point at $50,000 in income. 70% of renter households earn less than $50,000. 70% of people who own their homes earn more. So you kind of get an idea where the market is there. The unmet demand, current unmet demand for rental housing, they estimated what today you could add to the marketplace if it were available. 92% of that unmet demand, though, would be for, if it was going to be at 30% income, would be for rents of $800 or below. Not much new housing is being built at that rate. High demand for ownership housing below $250,000. Over 50% of the single family and condominium demand is in that range, and 64% of the single-family housing sales remain in that range, although that's a declining number over time. Used to be higher. So what's going to be driving our need for housing over the next 10 years? Employment growth. We're projecting 1% per year. That's been pretty much the trend with a little dip in the recession, but the long-term trend has been about 1% per year, and so that's what we're using for our estimates. Student enrollment increases. We're looking at a trend line again of about a 1% a year. That's a little less certain. The institutions, the college and university, who knows? We know Cornell would like to increase some of its enrollment. Hard to say for sure where that's going. Senior population, adult stage 2 population, projected to grow 44% in 10 years. I'm one of those folks that's going to go there. So that's huge. And those needs are not necessarily being met today. And the preference for walkable communities and access to transportation options, particularly among people living in the county, that's very clear that that's what people are looking for when they're looking for housing. So some of the other analysis, over the last 10 years, we looked at single-family housing starts, about 165 on average over that period, based on a couple different ways of analyzing what they think the demand would be or the sustainable rate of development. They came up with about 220 units, so we got a deficiency every year of, 50-some units, 60 units. And if we could build housing for under 200,000, there'd be another 85 units that would be demanded for single-family housing. The internet survey I mentioned, particularly looking at the in-commuters, there's a lot of good data on this on our website. Go look at it. You can learn a lot of interesting things about what people think about their housing. But looking at in-commuters and reading what people said about wanting to live in Tompkins County, planning to move in the near future, maybe moving to Tompkins County, you put that all together, about 1,500 in-commuters could potentially be looking to move into Tompkins County in the next 5 to 10 years. Most of them would prefer single-family homes. They live in them now. Most of them prefer to own. Most of them own now. The location preference might not be that surprising given that they're living outside the county, probably in rural areas now for a large part. But villages, suburban areas, and even a percentage in the city, there's a lot of opportunities of ways that demand could be met. There's also potential for more student housing. I guess we're seeing it happen before our eyes in College Town right now. But they estimated about 1,500 new student beds could be put into the market in the next 5 years, based on what would be expected in a student population of this size. Special needs housing. This is important. We didn't really delve into it as much last time, although it's been recognized under both of our comprehensive plans. But there's a lot of folks that have extra challenges. Women with children who may be fleeing an abusive situation, don't feel great going into a shelter, not a place you want to go with your kids. Supportive housing for individuals who can't function totally on their own. We have some of these facilities. There's waiting lists and demand for more. Halfway houses for people re-entering from incarceration, recovering from addiction. They need a place where they can be safe, secure, and not be tempted to go back to their prior ways. Group homes for young people, the closest one here is in Elmira. If a youth needs to go into a group home, they're going to be taken out of their community. Supportive apartments for youth. One of the most under-thought about groups in our community, I think, is those people 18 to 22, 24 who aren't going to college. And they feel that way. They feel like the unseen, unthought of population. And they're struggling to get on their feet, real tough to find housing. It's a real problem. And although not really a special needs, people moving from these situations can't find housing with good access to transportation where they can get to a job. All these people are looking to stabilize themselves, get a job. If you can't find housing that you can actually get to work on time, you can't afford maybe a car, your car breaks down, you can't use public transit because it's 5 miles away to get to a transit route. That's the kind of situation a lot of folks are facing. Senior housing, as I mentioned, that's going to be one of the biggest growing demands in our community. And what we heard from the people that are working with the senior community, adult stage 2, I have to learn that one, is that there aren't real options. A lot of people would like to downsize. There aren't really good options. We have folks that need assisted living that are on Medicaid. No facility in Tompkins County for them. And just generally having housing units that are designed to allow people to age in place, very hard to find in the community right now. So just a couple other quickly market efforts going on concurrently with our needs assessment. Downtown Ithaca Alliance hired Danter Associates also to look at the downtown market, and particularly looking at rental housing. They estimated that the potential absorption of 200 units per year, 60% of those would need to be in the $800 to $1,300 per month rental range. So some of what we've been seeing developed recently hasn't been in that range. This is based on what could be estimated could be captured in downtown as a desirable place to live if it could be built. So that's not to say that's the only place it might happen, but it could be captured there in the consultant's estimation. So this is more of a market study from a development point of view. Also, Cornell's been looking at its housing needs on campus in particular. And we'll hear more from Ryan Lombardi tomorrow about that. But just to summarize real quick, the Maplewood project, redeveloping the existing senior housing area to add like 500 units to the mix there. That's focused on graduate students, and that'll help a lot with what they see as graduate student housing needs. Now they're going to be looking to shift their attention to undergrads. They have a need to renovate and do deferred maintenance on a lot of the older on-campus dorms. So they need to build some new housing on campus to shift those students into while that work is happening. But they also see a need to add some additional dorm space on campus to serve the needs of those students, particularly the freshmen and sophomores who want to stay on campus, and sometimes they don't really have the place for them. So that is going to be something they're looking at very hard, and Ryan will talk more about it tomorrow. Also, in addition to meeting the current needs, if there's going to be any enrollment growth, they recognize the need to have housing to accommodate enrollment growth. So there's several components to that. We may hear some numbers about what those might be tomorrow. Finally, what do we think, based on all this, we're going to need in the next 10 years? Well, this is preliminary. We're still in discussion, still need to hear feedback from folks, and this is going to be ongoing discussion for a little while. But the model would suggest, at this point, that we need, on an annual basis, 200 rental housing units, countywide. A lot of them would want to be in the urban area. 300 ownership housing units, single-family homes and 80 condominiums. That's if we could build them at the price that people can afford. That's a challenge. Senior population, in addition to people just looking to downsize, those people that are looking for assisted living, independent living with some services, nursing care, whatever, we're going to need 50 to 100 beds a year projected over the next 10 years to keep up with those needs. Student housing, based on that assessment, it could be 150 beds to 300 plus, depending on whether enrollment grows at that 1% we're talking about. And then those special need housings for a lot of populations that really deserve our concern in the community. So what it looks like is kind of half in kind of single family attached or detached units, about half in what would be multifamily probably kind of buildings. So that means it's not going to all likely happen in one place. And it's not going to be all one kind of housing. We're going to have to see housing developed in various parts of the community, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow. So there's a lot more information on our county website about the assessment, a lot of reports that were done where you can see more detailed data. And we also, on the housingtompkins.com website about the Housing Summit, you'll be able to see next steps and how you can stay involved. And with that, thank you for coming. Those that are coming tomorrow, we'll look forward to seeing you. It is being live streamed tomorrow, so if you didn't get in, you can still watch it. It'll be recorded, and you'll be able to watch it later. So please keep informed and in touch and involved on the housing issues. Thank you.